Just write them like normal people. Okay, that's it. Roll the outro. Seriously though, writing LGBTQ characters is a lot easier than you might think. However, I do recognize that this topic is one many writers find difficult to discuss. So, in order to give useful information on this topic, I've spent a few days interviewing and researching opinions from members of the LGBTQ community, and today I'll be going over some tips and tricks for writing these types of characters. Additionally, I've included links in the description to charities and services if you would like to help members of the LGBTQIA+ community, or if you need help yourself. Please stay safe out there. It's a scary world. Being LGBTQ is normal. When I say normal, what I really mean is that they're just people, or whatever fantasy equivalent to a person there is in your world, I guess. LGBTQ characters are people. Heterosexual characters are people. Asexual characters are people. Aromantic characters are people. It's pretty simple. Write them just like you would any other character. They have hobbies, goals, relationships, fears, memories, and more, just like any other character would. Now, if these characters exist in a world where being LGBTQ is a problem, of course depict their struggles with that, but don't make being queer their entire personality. I'll touch on this more later, but these characters are more than their sexuality. That's an entire person with their own amazing brain, and you should write them as such. Of course they can have quirks, and of course they can have identifying traits, just like, again, other characters. The problems really only arise when you take one single stereotype and blow that up to make it your entire LGBTQ character. No, bad. Don't do that. As someone from the LGBTQ community puts it, I would want the character who is like me to have interesting motivations and compelling relationships and unique abilities, not to be defined by a singular aspect of their personality. Compelling characters are characters who the audience can relate to or sympathize with. People can't sympathize with a character who is unrealistic. Now listen, you can make a character's queerness a defining part of their life in that it affects their perceptions, relationships, and decisions. Think of it similarly as writing a character who's been to war. What they saw while at war will affect their outlook on the world and how they perceive things that are happening in it for really their entire life. Writing an LGBTQ character in this way is good representation. However, issues arise if you want to write a character like this, but give them absolutely no depth whatsoever and keep things at only a surface level. Unfortunately, most LGBTQ individuals face homophobia or transphobia at some point in their life, so it's really a matter of balancing the gay character's gayness shouldn't be their entire arc, and she's still going to be nervous telling people about her girlfriend. Basically, just give them depth. Normalize them by making them just as complex a character as you would write a straight character. Facing homophobia and transphobia are things most queer people go through, yes, but it isn't the only thing they go through. Also, side tangent, I do want to mention that there is an alternative to all of this. If you are writing a story where everyone is completely 100% accepting of every character's sexuality, and all it changes is who that character is attracted to, then you don't need to make their sexuality a big part of the story. Not every single story has to address the issues LGBTQ individuals go through, just like not in every story does your character's skin color have to affect their interactions with others. You can write a good story where everyone is viewed on equal terms, and sometimes it is refreshing to see stories like that, but either have exactly zero problems at all in relation to being LGBTQ, or address the struggles these characters go through. In my opinion, there isn't really a middle ground. Where your story takes place and the ideals that exist there are massively influential to people, especially those in marginalized groups such as the LGBTQ community. For example, the out of the closet into the fire trope. While it is incredibly overused, it is still a good example of how culture, or in most cases that this trope is used, religion, can affect a character. Another perspective to consider is setting. Oftentimes in stories, a gay character will just magically happen upon another gay character who is also single. This is not very realistic depending on your setting. If your character exists in a world where being LGBTQ+ is not accepted, you could instead write about how difficult it is to find a partner and the loneliness they feel because of that. While both gay and straight characters do have interests outside of their own sexualities, it is important to recognize these different challenges that LGBTQ characters face. If you are a straight individual trying to write about LGBTQ characters, I highly recommend talking to any person you might know that isn't straight, because it's impossible for you to assume what they go through, and incredibly hard to realize how even those really small aspects of your everyday life can affect them in big ways. There is an actual trope surrounding killing off your only gay character because it happens so much in media. This is big yucky. One super common use of this trope is having the only LGBTQ characters in your story be a couple, and one of them only exists to be a tragic figure after the other one dies. This trope is also fuel for the gangst-induced suicide trope, wherein one character's death is caused by suicide. This is pretty dang awful. Like seriously, having the only representation in your entire story be tragic or killing off one partner is disgusting. Oftentimes, the killing off one partner thing is done to avoid showing the more intimate details of an LGBTQ relationship. Again, this is not good. Now, the problem doesn't lie in the fact that gay characters are killed off. The problem is that this primarily happens in a story where every other character is straight, or that the character is killed off because they are gay. But really the biggest issue is what it mentions right here on tvtropes.org. The stories where gay people quietly lived out their lives in peace are often less documented, and considered less dramatically compelling for straight audiences. Ew. I really don't know what else to say. This point is probably the easiest to understand. I'm sure you've heard the term token black guy, or some variation of that, wherein a black character exists in a piece of media solely to be the black guy. They either die very early on in the story, or do nothing but exist. This same exact thing happens with LGBTQ characters, and really with any minority. They are put into a story to fill the gay quota. They don't have motivations, they don't have goals, and they don't have arcs. They exist solely so the author can say, wow, look at me, I put a person from X marginalized group in my work, I'm so progressive and cool. No! Bad! Don't do this! Stories are about characters, and characters are very complex. When you remove that complexity from a character, it reduces them to a prop. People are not props, so don't do this. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. Tokenization goes pretty hand in hand with the bury your gays trope, and I highly recommend if you want to write a serious story with LGBTQ characters in it, to check out the description and read a bit more in depth about this trope along with tokenization. Toasty, that's quite a large word. What exactly does it mean? Well, I'm glad you asked. I actually had no idea what it meant either until I looked it up on Wikipedia. However, the Wikipedia article is a tad wordy, so I'll try to explain it in a simpler manner here. But first, before I do that, let's read through the opening sentence in the Wikipedia article together. Intersectionality is a theoretical framework for understanding how aspects of a person's social and political identities, for example gender, race, class, sexuality, ability, physical appearance, height, etc., might combine to create unique modes of discrimination and privilege. Now, what the heck does that mean? Basically, if for example you're a woman, the experiences you have in life will be shaped by more than just the fact that you're a woman. If you're a straight woman, your life will be vastly different than if you were a lesbian. If you're a white woman, your life will be vastly different than if you were a black woman. It seems fairly simple when explaining it with only two factors. However, intersectionality applies to way more than just two factors. It is the study of every single unique thing about you and how that affects your life. When writing LGBTQ characters, writers oftentimes forget about intersectionality, and as mentioned before, end up creating a token gay character, or an LGBTQ character with very limited depth who only represents one letter of LGBTQ. Everyone is more than just that one prominent feature of themselves. The issue is that since writers tend to pay so much attention to a character's queerness, they sometimes forget to represent everything else about that character, as opposed to a straight character, as writers don't pay extra attention to that character's straightness like they would if they were gay. A few examples of intersectionality would be a lesbian black woman, a non-binary trans person, a pansexual trans person with disability, and a romantic gay man of color, an intersex person who is also trans and non-binary. See, it isn't just that guy is gay and that's it. There is so much more to a person, and it's important to represent all of those aspects of them. For this portion of the video, I'll be running you through a few other issues that I feel need to be addressed, but which couldn't be fit into the other portions of this video's script. All of these are either slightly rephrased quotes or direct quotes taken from individuals I have interviewed specifically for this video. Let's get going. Queer-coded villains. A queer-coded villain is usually a villain who dresses flamboyantly, in some cases they even do cross-dressing, and who has feminine features if they present themselves as male. They stand in stark contrast to the straight and often rather plain protagonists. Problematic issues arise when the villain is the only arguably queer character in the story, because they are often also presented as unrelenting evil and mentally unstable. Often enough, they also openly flirt with the protagonist just to mess with them. The main problem is that by relying on these token characterizations, you can slip really easy into mirroring misguided prejudices against LGBTQ+ people, like their being sexual predators. So, to avoid that, balance your representation with LGBTQ heroes to not give the impression that, for example, only gay men are evil overlords in your story. Queerbaiting. Disney does this with a lot of their properties. All of their movies get hyped up before release for being proper LGBTQ+ representation, but in actuality they were only mentioned because their character was off-screen or shown in the background for a couple of seconds. Should the way that characters speak be affected by their sexuality? The following is a quote spoken in direct response to being asked that question. The first time reading that question, I had to think of the stereotype of the super feminine presenting, giddy, gay man speaking with a light twang. This shows a problem when people try to differentiate straight characters from LGBTQ+ characters. They stick to common stereotypes. Said stereotypes are most often not created by the community itself, but rather by people who try to dehumanize and other them. Another example is the asexual character who doesn't get jokes, has no sense of humor, and talks rather monotonous, and most often isn't even human. Of course there are people like that, to some extent, but that does not mean that every single gay male character has to be like that. Just like not every butch lesbian is foul-mouthed or aggressive. So to make this short, instead of thinking about how sexuality affects their speech, think about what kind of person they are. Why are writers, even ones who fully accept and embrace the LGBTQ+ community, so afraid to write about LGBTQ+ characters? The following is again a quote spoken in direct response to this question. They seem to think that there is, besides the obstacles the community faces and what impressions they leave on the people, some sort of ominous extra level to the LGBTQ+ experience, and if they don't catch that as well as evade every queer trope there ever was, people will dogpile on them. And that's not true. Trust me, we are people, not some strange astral being defying time and space. Just write LGBTQ+ characters as the people you would write non-LGBTQ+ characters. If you have any other points or things you would like to address, please feel free to leave them in the comments below. I know there's normally a Toasty's Opinions segment with these videos, but as there's only one small thing I would like to add, I felt like it didn't need its own segment. The last thing I want to address is the fetishizing and sexualization of LGBTQ characters. After researching this topic, one example of this really jumps out at me, which is straight women seeing gay couples as cute, being incredibly intrusive with questions about their sex lives, or acting as though gay men are their puppies. If you're interested in a more in-depth read, I'll leave a link to the article I used in the description. Basically, the issue is that these women see them merely as cute animals that have sex, and not as human beings. They fetishize the sexual aspect of being LGBTQ, and ignore that person as being a person. This is a massive issue in real life, and is something that oftentimes can transfer over into writing. Really, as I've said 100 times over, make your LGBTQ character a character. Not just a sex object, not just to fill the gay quota, make them a character. Unfortunately, as a straight male, my understanding on this topic is rather limited by my own life experiences. However, hopefully my research was thorough enough and you found something helpful from this video. And hey, feel free to subscribe if you did. Thanks for watching my croutons, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.